Welcome back to another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. This week, hey, we're at Digital Dealer in Las Vegas, and so here is an awesome presentation for you. So I'm back at Digital Dealer once again, and as always, I'm going to share my entire presentation with you guys here on my weekly video series, but this time, Digital Dealer gave me 2 back-to-back hours. So it's a 2-hour presentation. I don't want to take up your entire time making you watch the whole thing. So this is just the first half. So this is about 40 to 45 minutes of presentation time. So kick back and enjoy. This is the Michael Myers Guide to Killing Your Competition with Automotive SEO. I'm Greg, but you know that because you're watching this on my video series. But I'm lucky enough to get to speak at lots of conferences. And you know, sometimes you see those speakers that maybe aren't as engaging in person when they're up on the stage talking. A lot of times they stand with their back to the crowd and they're reading their own slides, and the background of their slides is just plain white. It's Arial font, and they pack each slide with bullet points and just sit there and read bullet points. And that's no fun for anybody. And it's a scientifically proven fact that bullet points kill kittens. So today we're going to keep the kitties safe. And obviously you saw the Halloween reference there. Since the conference was just before Halloween, I had to go with a horror movie theme. So we've got 175 references to horror movies with at least one horror movie for every year in the last 50 years. There will be some obscure stuff in here. So if you're not sure what the movie is or something looks interesting, there is attribution over to the side. So you'll have a kick-ass list of creepy, spooky movies to watch. And if you're not a fan of horror movies and you're a little worried this might be a little too scary for you, I can tell you the scariest thing that you'll see today is some of the 80s fashion. So let's get this going. Why the long face? You need a hand with figuring out how to get your dealership to show up higher in search results? Lucky for you, I've got a couple to spare. I know a lot of times you feel like you're going to lose your head when you're thinking about SEO and how to get your dealership to show up higher. And it seems like so much work, but you don't have to bend over backwards. It's not really that hard. I've got some tips to share with you today that are going to rock your faces off. You're going to be able to make your sites so amazing, they're going to turn everybody's heads. Now, I've been talking about local SEO at Digital Dealer every year for over a decade, and Google releases over 3,000 updates every year, but the basics of local SEO have stayed the same. If we were going to look back at the presentations I gave 10 years ago, probably 70, 80% of what I'm going to say today is stuff I would have said back then. Most auto dealers and most of the automotive SEO vendors still really suck at SEO, even though I've been telling everybody exactly what to do for a decade. So this year, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. Instead of just sharing best practices and telling you what you should do, I'm going to share some hard data to show you what's actually going on and help prove the point. Because if you know what your competition and what other dealers are doing and what they're not doing, it helps you be better at SEO. So we're in the final stages of a really massive Google Business Profile research project where we pulled over 1.6 million data points on over 8,500 Google Business Profiles across 3 different verticals. When I pulled out all of the automotive ones and then removed all of the service and parts profiles, we ended up with 2,732 Google Business Profiles for car dealerships. And here's how we found them. I ran the keywords Ford dealer, Chevrolet dealer, Toyota dealer, Jeep dealer, Kia dealer, and used car dealer in those 14 cities. And then we looked at map pack rankings because, again, this is about the Google Business Profile. So we looked at map pack rankings, positions 1 through 20. The full results of the study will be released on our blog close to the end of this year. But today I'm going to share some of the kind of aha moments that we found so far as we've started looking through the data. Now, if we come back and look at this, we see that we did 6 different main keywords for dealership types. That means we should really only see those 6 as primary categories, but we saw 29 different primary categories selected for all of the dealerships that showed up. And most interestingly, check out the second one there. 19.1% of the dealers, 1 out of 5, had car dealer as their primary category. The most generic thing you can choose and definitely not the right thing to do. And there's 10 possible category slots, and there's more than 10 slots that apply to sales, yet 27% of the dealerships only had a single category selected. And looking through the reviews section, there were 2,765,085 reviews across the 2,732 Google business profiles. And for those of you that do math pretty quickly in your head, that's almost 1,000 reviews per dealership on average. So how do you compare to that? And we've talked at length in the past about the importance of adding UTM tracking to your website link so that you get better attribution in Google Analytics, and actually correct attribution in Google Analytics. But only about half of the dealerships are doing that. And I've talked a lot about questions and answers in the past and how important it is to upload your own common questions so it's a better pre-site FAQ experience. But across all the dealerships, we only saw an average of 6 questions in the questions and answers section. And I've also talked a lot about Google Posts and how to get Google Posts to work better for you and get you more visibility and more click-throughs. But in the past 12 months, more than half of the dealerships didn't use Google Posts at all. And then we've also talked about the importance of setting up a parts department and service department Google Business Profile. I even mentioned it a minute or so ago when I was talking about how we pulled those out so that we were only looking at the primary sales listings. Only 57% of the dealerships had those separate department profiles set up. In cars for sale, the inventory list that shows in your Google Business Profile came out a few years ago, and it's hugely important and every dealership should have it, but almost 30% of the dealerships didn't have it displayed. And then we started looking and saying, well, what high points or low points showed up? And we saw a single used car dealership that had almost 16,000 photos uploaded to their Google Business Profile, which is freaking crazy. And then looking at the Q&A section, we found a Ford dealership that had 108 questions in the Q&A section. And looking at reviews, there was a Toyota dealership that had almost 21,000 reviews, which is just insane, honestly. Just crazy stuff. I also have a scoring matrix that I use at 20 group meetings and with any potential dealers that might work with us or people that raise their hands at conferences. So I collected and analyzed all the scores that I personally did in the last year, and that ended up being 512 dealerships. Now, this matrix is basically a mini SEO audit that scores the 4 major areas that affect your site's visibility. And in those 4 areas, the scores are weighted to approximate the importance of each of those areas to Google's algorithm. So the on-site score has a maximum possible point value of 44 points, and it looks at the content on your site and how that content is optimized. The link score is looking at the links that point to your site from other websites and has a maximum possible point value of 10 points. The Google Business Profile score has a max point value of 32 points and looks at your business profile and how it's optimized. And then your reputation management score looks at your reviews on Google and Yelp and how you respond to those reviews. And that's got a maximum point value of 14 points. I want to point out, though, that the matrix scores tactics, not strategy. An easy way to think about this was awesome little tip from my buddy Andy Jarvis is strategy is where are you going and tactics are how you actually get there. We built this specifically to only look at tactics so that it was more universal. If it was too strategic, then anyone could take this to their marketing team or to their current SEO vendor, and the results could be refuted. They could say, oh, well, that's SearchLab's way of doing SEO, and they're not right, and we're right, so just ignore it because our way is better. But when it's really basic tactics that pretty much anybody that knows SEO would agree, these are the important things you need to do, then it can't really be argued by other vendors. Like one example of that is you should have your city in your title tag on your homepage. This doesn't ask, is the right city there? It just asks, is a city there? So you could be located in Dallas, Texas, and put Honolulu, Hawaii in, and you'd still get full credit in the scoring matrix because it's basic tactics. It's not the strategic side of, is it done correctly? So the average scores looked like this. Out of a maximum point value of 100 points, we saw an average of 22.5 points. The highest score that we saw across those 512 was a Volkswagen dealer who scored an 83.6. And then, like I said, we were looking at high stuffs and low stuff. So the lowest score that we saw was a Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram dealer with a negative 42.5. They were in really, really bad shape. We also track which website provider the dealerships are using, so we can then sort out all the numbers and see how the website providers were distributed. And it looked like this: 34% dealer.com, not surprising. They're the elephant in the room. They're in all of the OEM programs. They've been around forever. Part of the Cox machine. Then we've got Dealer Inspire next, and then Dealer On. No one's surprised. Those have been the top three for years. And then when we aggregate all the other platforms together, 13% there, and then only 5% left on Synchro, because obviously everybody's jumping ship because Synchro sucks. So here's how the scores broke down per website provider. If we took each of these and looked at the average scores, change the order a little bit. Dealer.com dropped way down. The highest scoring on average website platform was Dealer Inspire with a score of 24.9. Dealer On close behind with 20.9, then Dealer.com down at a 17.7, Synchro to 15.3, and all the other platforms averaged only 2.9. So let's ignore the three areas that don't really have anything to do with the website. So your Google Business Profile, your reviews, and links pointed to your site don't really matter which website platform you're on. They're not really influencing that or affecting that at all. So if we drop those out and just look at the average score of the on-site section per website provider, looks like this: 7.3 with Dealer Inspire, dropping down to about half of that with Dealer On, not even a full point with Dealer.com, a -1 for Synchro, and a -3 on average for all the other platforms. The overall average for the on-site score was just 3.4 out of 44. That's a 7.7% score. Like if we're looking at grade school style of, you're getting an A, B, C, or whatever, like you're getting a percentage out of 100, 3.4 is only 7.7% of the maximum possible value. The average link score was 1.9 out of 10 points. Easy math there. That's 19%. The average Google Business Profile score was 10.5 out of 32. That's a 32.8. That just shows that dealers put a lot more effort into their Google Business Profiles. And then the average review score was 4.1 out of 14, which is a 29.3. If we put those percentages together, it really shows where most dealers are missing the boat with SEO. You can see where they're concentrating and where they're not concentrating. Because on-site is the most important for organic visibility, and on-site is where your SEO vendor is going to be putting their effort, but it's the lowest average score. We got 32% with Google Business Profiles, 29% with reviews, 19% with links, and only 7% with on-site. And on-site is the most weighted in the matrix and in the algorithm. And I want to point out a few common mistakes to help you avoid some of the bad things that we see pretty often out in the wild. When you're optimizing the elements on the page, or when your vendor partner is optimizing elements on the page, you want to be sure you don't have multiple cities in the title tag or multiple cities in your H1 heading. You're not going to show up in multiple cities just because you list 3 or 4 cities in your title tag. On each individual page of the site, that page should be optimized around a single location. We also see a lot of mismatching of keywords and even mismatching of cities in the title tag and the H1 and other elements. So as you're optimizing the title tag, the H1 heading, the content, the alt text of the images, and all those different elements on the page, you should be optimizing around the same targeted keyword phrase every time and the same city every time. You can't mention one city in the title tag and a different city in the heading and a third city in the content. It doesn't work that way. We also see a lot of useless near me pages. You're not going to show up as a search result because you have a page that says, "Are you looking for a Ford dealer near me?" It doesn't work that way. Whenever someone searches for something near me, they're explicitly telling Google that they want results that are close to them physically in the real world based on their location when they do the search. You're going to show up for that search if you're near that person when they do the search. You're not going to show up for the search because you have a page that says near me on it. So those are useless. So we also see a lot of useless city pages where dealers will throw out 40 or 50 different, just completely useless pages with hardly any content that just say Ford dealer Dallas, Ford dealer Richardson, Ford dealer Plano, Ford dealer Allen, Ford dealer McKinney, trying to show up for all the cities in their local area. That stuff doesn't work either. We also see a lot of content pages that don't have a single photo, and you should have at least a photo on every page of content on your site. So avoid these errors. Make sure you're doing SEO the right way. But you're probably watching this so far and saying, all right, dude, all this is cool and it's some interesting data, but what does it all really mean? It means if you want to succeed, you should be on Dealer Inspire for the website platform. And you need to be really aggressive with the content on your website and how you optimize that content. And you need to be incredibly aggressive with your Google business profile. And you need to be aggressive with customer reviews and how you respond to those reviews. If you'd like to get your dealership scored and you're watching this on desktop, you can scan that QR code right there and it takes you to a form that lets you enter your information and we'll run your scores and then we'll let you know. Or if you're watching this on your phone, you can just pop me an email at greg@searchlabdigital.com and I'll score your site. Now keep in mind too, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not gonna try to sell you anything. I just want to score as many dealerships as possible so that I can get more data, so that I can help more dealers be better at what they're trying to do. And speaking of what you're trying to do, before we actually talk about that, we need to talk about the broken system that exists in automotive. We have this crazy OEM approved vendor program in automotive that doesn't really exist in any other vertical, and it's not in your dealership's best interest. Those OEM approved vendors are required to work with any dealership that wants to sign up, which means if your competitor wants to sign up, then cool. They're going to be doing SEO for you and for your direct competitor. Typically, they have incredibly overloaded teams. We know for a fact that several of the OEM providers, if you break down the number of dealerships versus the number of people on the teams, each team member is responsible for over 100 dealerships each per month. If you do the math on that, there's only 160 hours of working time, which means you're getting maybe an hour a month of work for the money that you're spending. That's not great. They're also locked into specific packages. Once you get into the program, it's exceedingly difficult to change your offerings, even though, like I mentioned earlier, Google releases thousands of updates per year. And because of that, they provide the same cookie cutter service for every single dealership that they work with, which means a Ford dealer in Dallas, where there's 20 Ford stores all in one densely packed market, gets exactly the same SEO as a Ford dealer in Wyoming who doesn't have another Ford dealership that they're competing with for 100 miles. Those are two vastly different situations that require vastly different strategies and tactics. But if you're using that OEM approved provider, you're getting the exact same thing at each place. So how is that good for your dealership? If you want to win in today's market, you need a customized SEO strategy that looks at your specific store and your specific location and your specific goals. Those OEM approved vendors are using the same strategies and tactics they've been using for years. So nothing is going to be customized around what you're doing. And most of those vendors are doing traditional SEO. They're not doing local SEO. Now, if we're going to look at the signals that matter to the algorithm between regular SEO and local SEO, there's some overlap, but local SEO is much better. If we were going to do a Venn diagram, it would look like this. So if you're doing SEO with a traditional vendor partner, that's the yellow circle. And only really the little bit of overlap there in green is what's going to be beneficial to your dealership. Where if you're working with a local SEO vendor, 100% of what they're doing is going to benefit your dealership. This is important because the local algorithm is different from the traditional algorithm. It evaluates additional signals, so it's more complex. You have to do more things that you don't have to do in regular SEO. And car dealers absolutely need to be doing local SEO. We know this because any searches related to car dealers are automatically localized. Like, here's an example. Sitting in my office, I did a search for Ford dealer, and it doesn't show me the best Ford dealers in the entire country or the best website in the country. It shows me the Ford dealers that are closest to my physical location when I did the search, even though I didn't specify that with a phrase like a city or a neighborhood or near me or nearby. It's important to understand where the local algorithm is going to display those localized search results so that you understand your potential visibility in search results. The most obvious clue that the local algorithm is at play is when you see the map pack. Now, the map used to be on top, and it's still on top on mobile, but on desktop, Google moved the map over to the side. This shows you that the local algorithm is at play. But then at the bottom, you can click more locations or more places, depending on what the search query is. And that takes you to a page called the Local Finder that goes beyond just the top 3 and shows you every business in the area that matches the intent of your search query. You can also go directly to Google Maps and do a search inside of Google Maps. Now, this looks very similar to the Local Finder, but there's something very important that I want to point out that's different. When you go to the Local Finder, that's when you've clicked more locations or more places underneath the map pack. And notice here, we see the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area, mainly because it's showing all of the Dallas market. But when I go directly to Google Maps from the exact same location where I did the search, notice how tight the radius is there, because this is centered on my location in the real world where I did the search. That's because when you go to Google Maps, there's a more clear local intention that you're probably looking for directions to go visit that location or one of the locations that you find. That's why Google's going to dial it in and have a tighter visibility radius. But then below the map pack, it's not regular organic listings. They're still localized. So everything is still going to be in your immediate area. I like to boil things down to simple concepts so it's easy to remember when you're trying to make your changes to your strategy and you're talking to your boss. A lot of times it's easy to have these simple concepts to help illustrate the point. So if you need help understanding how the local algorithm works, I like to use pizza delivery. Now, there's a video there that you can go watch that's a past video from this series. But the concept is basically this. If you're sitting in the office and you do a search for 2 words in Google, pizza delivery, you get a list of all the pizza spots that are right there by your dealership. But then you could go home tonight and try the same search with the same 2 words, pizza delivery, and you're going to get a list of all the pizza spots that are right there by your house. And most people aren't going to do that in the real world and compare the results. But if you think about it, you got 2 completely different search results with the exact same search query. That wouldn't happen with traditional SEO, but it happens with local because Google knows for certain verticals and for certain searches that even if you don't specify that you want local results, you need local results. So that explains how local SEO works. It's also important to understand and illustrate why you need local SEO. You can use some simple back of the bar napkin math to prove this. And this video goes a little bit more in depth, but at a high level really quickly. Let's say there's 5 new car dealers and 15 used car dealers in your city. That's 20 car dealerships fighting for most of the terms that matter to the dealerships. There's 13 spots available on page 1 of search results because you've got 3 spots in the map pack and 10 organic spots. But you're also going to have AutoTrader, Cars.com, some of those third-party aggregates. Let's take those out to see the actual possible spots that dealerships could show up in. There's typically 7 or 8. So if there's 20 dealerships in town with only 7 or 8 spots on page 1, that means 12 people aren't on page 1, and there's only 10 on page 2, which means 2 of those dealerships are going to be all the way back on page 3 where no one's going to find them. And most of you are probably in bigger markets or bigger metros where sometimes there's up to a couple of hundred dealerships fighting for those 7 or 8 spots. That's why local SEO is so important. I strongly encourage you to check out the annual local search ranking factor study. Nobody knows what's in Google's algorithm. Google doesn't even know because they use machine learning now. But the concept behind this is to kind of check with all of the top experts and then aggregate the answers because they might all disagree on strategy, but tactically they all know which things matter to Google's algorithm because they're testing this stuff day in and day out and doing this all the time. So they take the top 40 experts in local SEO across the planet and they send out a very in-depth survey. And then they aggregate all of the answers so that you get a really good guide for what matters for local search. So the most recent version of the study gave us 2 pie charts. One showing the signals that matter for local search visibility in the map pack or in Google Maps. And notice how big the Google My Business or Google Business Profile section is because that's where the location factors live. And in the map pack or on Google Maps, location and proximity are much more important. And then the next biggest section of the pie is reviews. Now, notice when we look at the pie chart for the localized organic, reviews in Google My Business are a lot smaller. And now it's more like the traditional SEO signals of the content on your site and how it's optimized and the links pointed to your website. The LSERF, or the local search ranking factors, is your guide for which signals matter the most for local search visibility. So it's your guide for what to do to get your dealership to show up better in searches. Before we dig in anymore, I do want to note that if you don't have GA4 installed, you need to install it immediately. It's very simple. Just go into Google Analytics and go to settings and use the GA4 setup wizard. But GA4 starts July 1st next summer. And at that point, current analytics stops working and historical data doesn't transfer over. Most of you have probably heard about this already, but if you're watching this and you haven't heard about this, you need to install GA4 as quickly as possible, because otherwise you're not going to have any historical data when the new analytics starts working. So let's talk about how to optimize your digital footprint. Boiled down to the simplest concept, Google is really just a pattern detection program, and doing SEO gives your dealership a more attractive pattern. And doing SEO also helps improve the user experience on your site so that you're going to convert more customers. And here's where we're going to pause, because that's the end of part 1. I was lucky enough to get 2 back-to-back sessions at Digital Dealer. So I had almost 80 minutes, I guess, of time to present about SEO. And I didn't want to make this a massively long episode of Local Search Tuesday. So I'm pausing in the middle here. Make sure you tune in next week for the second half of the presentation. Thanks for sticking around to watch the whole thing. I hope you enjoyed it, but for now, we're definitely out of time for this week. So you know what that means. Put your hand on the screen right here. We totally just high-fived because you learned something awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Local Search Tuesdays.